Good morning. Oh, come on. I'm going to do the hawk up here if everyone doesn't say good morning. You know I'm a 15-year rugby veteran, like Union I played. Good morning. Good morning. My daughter plays also. I was a tight head. She's a loose head. Two props actually make a prop. That's what happens. We don't have a winger in my family anywhere. Just letting you know. But I'm excited about today. You know why? I'm going to make you all very uncomfortable. That is my job. Get comfortable right now with being uncomfortable. Is everybody okay with that? By the way, when I travel the world and I tell people that I'm an ex-competitive rugby player for 15 years, they're like, oh, what? Oh my gosh. In New Zealand, they're like, yeah, we're all that. I'm like, I get it. I'm like, we all can't be Portia Woodman, although I worship her. So we all need to understand that, you know, it's usually a little bit more menacing other places where I live. So I do have to show this. This is actually our safe harbor statement. I like to call myself, I don't love the words thought leader, although a lot of people call me that. I like near-term futurist more than anything, because I am going to talk about things about today that you can do, things in the near term, and things in the long-term future. But you should not make any purchases today based on any one particular piece of information that I'm going to give you. Some of it is things you can buy today, some are things you can buy tomorrow, but just keep that in mind when you look at the safe harbor statement. A little bit about me. By the way, Queen of Prefab is not a self-given name. I was going on stage in Asia once, and they said, where's your boss? And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, where's the CEO? Where is he? And I said, I'm the CEO. And he said, oh, we're paying you to get on stage? And I said, yes. And so he walked on stage, and he introduced me as the Queen of Prefab, I think more because he was embarrassed. And so to my young women out there, I met Caitlin and Grace last night, who said in their college they never see a woman CEO once come through, that when they bring speakers in, we're here. Sometimes we look differently than everybody else out there, and you can dress and feel however you want, but guess what? Women are CEOs in our space. We are vice presidents, we are senior vice presidents, and we actually are changing the world. So I love meeting young women like that and people that look differently, talk differently, because it's all about diversity and perspective. So I've done a lot around the world, including in Asia, in Australia, and New Zealand. I've worked for customers here, all throughout Europe. Here's the one thing I ask. We're gonna do question and answers at the end, real quick. Don't wait until you get to the elevator and say like, well, you can't really do that here. Bring it up. We're brave. Let's be courageous. I usually say questions and challenges welcome. I change my mind all the time. That's called, lean thinking. I want to improve. So I love being told that my ideas are not right. Let's talk about something called expected experience. This is an easy question. Who likes pizza? Raise your hand. I like pizza. I mean, I don't eat Domino's because I'm from Jersey, and in Jersey it's like you only eat from the little grandma down the street that makes pizza. But like, I love pizza. If right now I wanted to order a pizza, if I were wearing my Apple Watch, I could order a pizza off my watch, pay for it probably using a Cash App like Venmo or anything else, customize that pizza, right? See exactly when it went into the oven, understand my estimated time of delivery, when it was coming out. I could make sure that the background check on the driver was probably done. It would tell me it's a 5-star rated driver. I would see it actually traveling in my neighborhood. And because I have a cute little Labradoodle, I want to make sure that he doesn't bark. So on my Ring doorbell on my watch, I could probably know 2 minutes in advance so that I could either say, hey, contactless delivery, or I'll come out and I'll just take the pizza from you, right? That's how we order pizza. Everybody? Yes? Why is it, if you watch the Autodesk Construction Cloud commercial, why is that the expected experience of ordering a pizza, but it is completely acceptable to have an expected experience of calling somebody who has to call somebody else, to call somebody else to call another person, leave a voicemail, get a call back, to call somebody else to see if my $300,000 piece of critical equipment is showing up on my job site today? Right? Raise your hand. I'm a contract. By the way, we say I'm still wet and dirty from industry, right? I'm not a tech. I didn't grow up in tech. How many people do that right now today? Raise your hand. Why is that acceptable? Why do you accept that as if that's the only way to understand that a piece of critical equipment is showing up on your job site when we know you can order a pizza like that? People who have far less money in technology. And by the way, not just Domino's, small companies actually do this as well and start up in their garages. Why is that acceptable? Here's a question for you. How many of you are under 30 in the audience? Wow, fantastic. I'm gonna pick on my two friends up there. Caitlin, I need a reverse mentor all the time. When People ask me to mentor them. I say, no, I will only mentor you if you reverse mentor me if you're under 30. Because I need to understand what Caitlin's expected experience is with ordering a pizza so that I ask myself, why do I put up with this nonsense of like calling somebody to call somebody? And she goes, that's stupid. We should just do it like we order pizzas. And I go, how do you order pizza at 21 years old? And then they explain it to me. We have to change our mindsets. By the way, I was here 8, 9 years ago, and everyone kept saying, but we're New Zealand, and we're small, and we need scale. Guess what? Your mind is your mind. Your expected experience, small, large, medium, it doesn't matter. You can do all of these things if you're the smallest country in the world, the biggest country in the world. You can change your mindset, right? So feel free to ask me some questions about scale, but I have a particular feeling about scale in New Zealand. You were able to change the banking system here as a country, a small country that changed the way we bank in the world. We can surely change the way in which we look at design, make in the world. So just keep that in mind. All right, so I live my life by this formula. For those of you who have seen any one of my talks, I showed in every single one of my talks. It's actually, for my women in the audience, it was a formula made by Dan Miller. She didn't get credit for it. She had to fight for credit for it, and then they actually gave it back to her. And if you look it up on Wikipedia, there's a whole bunch of that. I think I like it extra because of that, but I happen to really like the formula. Here's what the formula says. In order to change, you first need dissatisfaction. Let me say that part again. In order to have change, you have to first be unhappy. That doesn't mean you need to be miserable like you don't love the way things are. You could have some aspirations you're not reaching, and that can also create dissatisfaction. Now, this is a very important question. How many of you are dissatisfied today with your company, with this ecosystem, with the built environment? Raise your hand. Put your hands down. How many of you are completely happy? Raise your hand. Be courageous. Anyone happy? 1, 2. I can't really help you guys that much, but here's what I will say. My friends that had BlackBerries thought they were super happy. They loved how they touched the buttons. I felt it in my fingers, and I was like very tactile. I have ADHD, so I was like, ooh, I love this. By the way, when my friend got an iPhone, I was like, this thing sucks now. So just keep in mind, like you might be happy without understanding the next part of this, which is you need to have vision. I don't know, like take it for yourself. So you need to know what is possible, because then you could be like, wait a minute, I didn't even know that was even a possibility that I didn't have to like touch buttons and I could like use my voice. By the way, I have long nails. I voice text every day. The buttons were great, but this is much easier that I can voice text, right? So you have to have vision of what's possible. After that, and by the way, that's when you see all these cool things, and I love Autodesk, I love working there, but that's when you see like armies of robot dogs are coming. We should all know that, right? And that's true. And we go, look, the world is going to work in this way. And we go, wow, I want that. But then it's sort of, you forget that next part, which is like, okay, hold on a minute. Armies of robot dogs are coming. What's the first concrete step of action I can take? How does a robot dog want to be played with? How do they eat? Where do they sleep? Like, what do I do? Is my house ready for a robot dog? Like, does it like interaction? Do they like kids? Do they like other robot dogs? Like, you kind of need to know the first concrete steps of action if an army of robot dogs, air quotes, is coming. And so that's where we sort of fall down. And I'm going to give you some first concrete steps of action today and hopefully show you some vision. Because all of that has to be greater than resistance. Here's the trick of resistance and friction, most of which comes internally at your own organizations, not externally. Clap if you agree with that statement. Most of the resistance comes internally. Okay, good. That's the part we always say, well, you can't do this and you can't do that. And I started doing this game in my consulting business years ago that was like, I could do this if. Let's start saying like we can't do this. Give me all the constraints of if we had this information, we could do this, right? And usually I play that game internally with companies because then they want to tell me every reason if they have these things, something could work. And I'm like, great, we just made our own constraint log that we can remove all these constraints. So you have to be able to overcome resistance. And no matter where I am in the world, and I work with some of the big bigs, and by the way, I was a small woman-owned business, so I work with even little companies all day long. I ask CEOs this in any language, the translator translates this, and the CEO immediately knows what I'm saying. What does your business want to be when it grows up? Right? What does your business want to be when it grows up? I want you to think about that. Because business models are actually changing. We all talk about convergence all the time, convergence of technology and convergence of processes. But at the end of the day, business models have changed. Around the world, and I've done some other talks on this if you want to check out the YouTube channel, people are actually not just owners anymore. A lot of owners don't own one building, they own 30 data centers. They don't just own one hospital, they own 10 hospitals. You know, this is changing, and those owners need different things. And just like our contractors are changing, they are becoming more like product and systems integrators. How many people, any manufacturers in here make building products? What's your name? Where do you work? Steel and Chew. Did I say that right? Great. Most of my building product manufacturers, whether they make windows or they make steel assemblies or they make anything, want to get to the front of the process, and they want larger and larger assemblies to be consumed in the design in their context so that they don't have to do this thing that's really dirty and nasty called protecting the spec. They get their stuff in there, and then they have to figure out how it's going to work to make sure that it doesn't get out of there. So a lot of my building product manufacturers, the largest in the world, want to go to the front of the process with larger and larger assemblies. And even my architects, and this is the hard one, raise your hand if you're an architect. I'm guessing that's the majority of you guys. I'm an equal opportunity offender, but I will mostly offend architects more than anybody. I'm just letting you know. I'm not saying they're sensitive, but just letting you know. That's the dirty contractor in me, I think. Phil Bernstein said that to me once. You guys know who Phil Bernstein is? He's like, Amy, don't dirty contractor argue with me. And I was like, that's the only, hey, free fights here. That's what contractors are. But the hardest part about being a designer these days and an architect is you want to become a generative designer. But here's the problem. Most of the information isn't actually generated by you. You don't have the make information. You're highly dependent on the data of these other groups. You're more the consumer of that information and the disseminator of that information. And hopefully you take your, watch this, domain expertise, and you figure out how to apply that to some of the data coming in and some of the data going out. So I won't go too deep into this, but if you want to see a little bit more about the transformation framework, when I first got to Autodesk, I was like, I really feel like I need to write this framework for some people because they have all this software coming in, they have all these things going on, all these initiatives. And I was like, if you really just want to understand how to transform yourself, because I truly believe that digital waste exponentially leads to physical waste. Do you believe that? Digital waste exponentially leads to physical waste on this planet. And if you truly want to get to circularity, at the end, you first have to understand if you have the foundational skills and tools in your organization. Then you have to start productizing, not just the physicality of piece parts, but the digital workflows need to be mapped and actually productized so that you can repeat them and you can eliminate steps and you can automate them so that you can digitize things and connect them with everyone and the stakeholders that are there, right? So only then you can optimize things. The problem is we go robot dogs, I'll take 50. And by the way, I don't want to say this is a gender thing, but we like to buy toys if you're on the male side of the gender. I like toys too, I buy things. But they go, robot, give me a robot. I'll buy that today. And then I go, wait, if you don't know how to, if you don't have those other 4 steps, the robot in your factory becomes just like a 6-axis arm robot. It's hard to feed. And by the way, it just gets like my treadmill in my house that's very dusty. It either, no one uses it at some point, even though you can afford it, or it makes scrap faster, right? You just can't go and buy toys. Is that a gender biased thing to say that men like to buy things like that? Women like toys? You guys like big toys and stuff? I do, but okay, just thought I'd throw that out there. Equal opportunity offender. So we have to optimize things. By the way, you can't use generative design unless you have products, right? You can feed the generative tool with how many of you are working on computational design right now in your practices? Anyone? That's a good number, by the way. That makes me hopeful in New Zealand, by the way. Usually it's less than 3% of the architects in the audience actually are talking about computational design in their practices that actually know how to do it. So think about that, right? Because ultimately we want to get to circularity. I believe architects, what's your first name? Because I know I'm going to offend you. Matt?
Bring it on.
All right. I believe I would love you to assemble architecture that already exists in things that are not so exciting to you, like fire stairs. So it frees you up to spend the time on the stairs in the front of the building. I won't say the word that starts with P, they call it stair. Thank you, good. So I would rather you not have to do fire stairs and doors and hardware and interstitial spaces. By the way, 90% of what you get paid for is documentation, which means nothing to a guy like you in a fabulous shirt. 10% is for your genius ideas. I want you to get paid 90% for your genius artistic ideas and 10% on the stuff that you can assemble because it already exists. Good? I want that future state for you. Me too. All right. So what if that actually could be? I'm going to talk a little bit about vision. What if you could actually look at data like it was reusable? Fire stairs. What if it was seamless? What if it was granular? What if you could decouple some of these pieces and parts and you could reuse them and you could attach IoT sensors to things and understand how they were performing over time so that you could choose whether or not, as the architect, Matt could say, wait, right now carbon is more important to me, life cycle, than cost, or right now sustainability, not so important because I really need to get this building out. So what if he had all these levers to pull because the data was actually there throughout the entire life cycle in real time so that he could actually make choices? Instead of just, this is the offensive part, instead of just drawing dumb boxes. And I mean dumb, like there's no data. like we don't even know what that box is, like you filled it in because it happened to be needed a space there and you don't really have the make information. By the way, my best architect friends in the world that are famous tell me all the time, we don't know how to make stuff. And I was like, that's fine. I have them recorded just in case nobody doubts me, anyone doubts me. But here's why they don't. Not because they're not smart and fashionable and amazing. Imagine every piece part in this building for you to be able to understand as an architect actually how it fits together with something else, all the typical details that you actually need to know for every system here, and then multiply it by the number of proprietary systems that exist on this planet. Do you know how to make things? No, right? The answer is no. You can't possibly. No human could actually understand that. But what if we actually had access to that? What if you were powerful? By the way, I go on Amazon all the time. I don't know how to make shoes, but I can buy some shoes on Amazon, and I can set some parameters like I want heels, and they got to be red, and 5-star rating, and I bought them before, and oh my God, I already own that pair. There's a lot of data there, right? We don't have that. You're stuck on a static desktop right now, and then you maybe have to call somebody to see who makes something, right? What if there was a common data environment in all of your companies where instead of like doing point-to-point connections, you actually had a central repository where that information existed? What if that central repository was actually connected to other people's real-time marketplaces and central repositories? That's the future part of that. Currently, you could have a common data environment, but there's right now limited places it can connect to. Because I want what you want. I want to know if I ask like who makes this electrical room, who actually really makes it, so that I could find out and I could get all the information I need about it and all the data live with that electrical room that I wanted. And so that I could share that information, because I really hate that phrase, single source of truth. Aren't you guys tired of that? Is anyone really like, I'm just like, can we stop saying that? I would never be like, the single source of truth on Amazon is that my thing is taking 2 days to come here, and the single, like we just, let's look like normal people, young people. Do you say single source of truth? Never. They're like, I love your, she goes, we never say that. I'm like, yeah, don't say that anymore. So we want real-time connection. You saw the funny commercial with Autodesk? It is funny because it's true that you could end up with a waterfall on your project if you're just calling somebody to call somebody. We want connected teams, and you can have that. You want connected processes, and you definitely want connected data that's real in real time, that you can do something with predictive analytics, not just later when it's too late, right? And most of our big customers are talking about data evolution. All of you know what BIM standards are, right? What are the data standards your owners need, Matt? What are the actual data standards? Are they defined? Do you know how they want to use that data? He's like, Some, okay, that's good. I will tell you that my big owners actually, when I go, what are the data standards and the way in which you want this data around your data center when it's done so that you can reuse that data, they're like, what? Because every one of their partners does 20, 30 different pieces of software. They know what BIM standards are, but they don't know what data standards are. And so most are thinking about data evolution so that they can start informing design. And look, that word standardization doesn't mean you can have any color as long as it's black. It means there are standards created that you know what you can customize and what you cannot, right? By the way, no architect in the world wakes up and says, I know that Kohler generators or FG Wilson makes a 200 and a 250. Matt never wakes up and goes, you know what, screw those guys. I'm making a 217 and a half today, right? He doesn't. That's the difference. You know you have a product or a process that's inefficient when you're thinking about the life cycle of these components, right? If you are like a generator and you know what you can actually do in the scale, you've done it. If it's not and it's like, well, you haven't. So we need to do that so we can enable others, create some analytics around this, enrich that data, and actually improve it, and so others can adopt it. This is the hard part. You might not be able to go to 10 people for bids anymore. That very inefficient, who's in procurement right here? Anyone in procurement? That's the worst job ever besides estimators, besides cost, you don't call them that here, besides quantity surveyors. Quantity surveyors have the worst job. You have the second worst job because they actually make you ask the dumbest questions in the world as if we don't know who we already want to pick. It's just a waste of time. It's a transactional waste. We have to stop drawing things that will never be built. We have to stop going out to bids that will never be won. We have to stop creating waste on waste on waste. And why do we do that? I said this to the ladies last night. First of all, you need governance to make sure this doesn't happen. To all my young people, if you're ever asking yourself, this is stupid, why do they do this in the built environment these days? Do you remember, ladies, what I said last night? There's only one answer, and the answer is money. That's it. People get paid for wasteful things we do. And I have a friend that owns a big practice. You know what he said, Matt? He goes, I had to burn my business to the ground. in order to build it up for I know it's going to be much more resilient. He was designing as a services engineer all the things that would never be built the way in which he designed them, and he said, this is useless. So he stopped doing that now for big owners, and he works only with the makers, and he actually designs products that are used all the time, and he's now made this connection. They have a Revit plugin called Configure. They're actually connecting with, they have a consortium that work together so that they don't draw things anymore that are just fake. Right? He stopped doing that. So we have to think about informed design is how do we get product data associated with that stairwell, that skid, that assembly, that window, that steel structure, whatever that is, so we can configure them. That's the true nature of what generative is supposed to be, and so that we can reuse them, understanding the data of their performance. By the way, that exists right now. So a few years ago, I started saying, BIM is great, but that's like you have to be this tall to ride the ride only. Now I want to get on the ride because I'm tall enough with my heels. And I have to say, wait a minute. The eye in BIM, here, I'm going to prove my point. The eye in BIM has to be intelligent. How many of you have had a BIM model? Where are my contractors? Raise your hand. Contractors. How many times have you had a BIM model you cannot build? Thank you. That was, I'm going to buy you a Guinness later because that's the only right answer. Why do we have BIM models that you can't build from? That kind of defeats the purpose of building information modeling because the eye is not intelligent. If you have a BIM model with dumb boxes, whatever they are on the spectrum, you can't build it. The eye has to be informed by how things can be made, what's available in those products, what is their sustainability information, what is the supply chain information we need. It has like a little Dora the Explorer backpack on it. How many of you know who Dora the Explorer is? Pretend you have a magical backpack on the end of your little skid, and inside it you go, I need rope. And only rope pops out. I don't take off my backpack, dump it on the ground, look for rope, put it back in. It's very heavy. Think uploading and downloading, put it on my back. I just go as Dora. I'm like, I need rope. Rope saves the day. And then later I go, I need a ruler. Ruler comes up, and I save the day. Data backbones, like working with people like Datum 360, one of our partners, gives you a little data backpack on that little skid and allows you an extensible amount of data. Right now, I always say, like, I don't know all the data we're going to know about these piece parts. We were talking the other night about CO2 emissions, carbon dioxide emissions, excuse me. When people are stressed in this theater, which probably most of you are at this point, they could actually gather up the carbon dioxide and test. At what time does Amy speak that people get really stressed out versus when she doesn't? Why would we care about that? Because if you can test that for things like my friend who owns every giant pet store in the United States, he wants to know down what aisles and combination of things make his pets and owners feel uncomfortable, because when they're uncomfortable, they don't buy stuff. Imagine that little data backpack. I knew the configuration of all the aisle things that you picked that make those pets actually comfortable and the owners comfortable, so he could do it again so they would buy more stuff. That kind of blows your mind, right? That's happening today, those types of things. If you don't know that, we're in a highly instrumented and collecting data world all the time. We all know that, right? But what do we use it for? That's what we have to start thinking about informed design. But we have to kind of flip things on its head. You have to define products first. You don't know how to make things. Should you be defining those products? Probably not. Who makes something here? My steel person in the back. You have to step up. What do you do? Okay, great. Oh my God, I love modular balconies. One of my favorite things, by the way. My biggest building product manufacturer has 4 companies in the US that makes all 4 components of like the glass and the steel. He's like, I've never had them on any project ever at one time, ever in the history of balconies. And so now he makes modular balconies. Why? He wants to go to the front of the process like you. You have to provide that data. You have to step up now and understand your common data environment and how you're going to productize these things for informed design so that designers can consume them and customize them so that you can get the information back and you can actually make the thing, because Matt didn't stretch it 1 meter too long. That would be a lot. Half a meter too long, now you can't make it. Revit allows you to do some of those things that manufacturers don't want you to do, right? By the way, informed design is more like taking Inventor data or Fusion data or mechanical CAD data, even SolidWorks, and being consumed by Revit so you can't stretch it to make it unmakeable. Protecting Matt from himself, right? Like that's what so that, what's your name? William? So that you can make it still. You want that, and you want that, and the general contractors don't want that so much because you get paid to figure out how to fix this mistake when Matt stretched it too long. So you better figure out how to make money, because that's where your risk really is right now. If you're making money on all the inefficiencies, which my dad used to say, he'd be like, look, when a bunch of contractors are looking at the ceiling, he would say, we're either making money right now or we're losing money right now. I don't know which, but one of them is happening. And I was like, okay, so the makers have to do that. And the operators, right, we want to have that data, so we own that data, so we know how that balcony performed. Or think data centers. What combination of information? If I own 30 data centers, I want to know how all my kits of parts are performing. Think digital twins. We all talk about asset twins, right? Everyone talks about assets. I want to say, if I'm a data center owner, I want a fiber twin. I want to understand where the fiber's coming undersea and what's going on in dark fiber. I want a weather twin. I want to understand like what the PUE is going to be, my usage of the energy. I want my asset twin. I want to understand how things are performing. I want to know about traffic and like security. These are layers of twins in the future state, layers. And if you have some domain expertise and you want to build some cool app on the Autodesk Platform Services, hurry up. You don't have to be so big to do that. Guys start billion-dollar apps in their garages, right? That was my New Zealand comment. This is better than a garage here. So we need that information to inform our digital twins. So manufacturing informed design, which there's an incubation that actually I was part of that now got approved up through Andrew, our CEO, that is happening right now. For things like Inventor to the Autodesk Platform Services. Think like I created everything that that balcony has and how it's made and the data around it. And it can be consumed into the Autodesk Platform Services. So maybe I don't want to go to Revit first. Maybe I want to go to SpaceMaker first and do test fits of the building and the balcony and everything that's happening. Then go back out to the platform and then back into Revit, back out to the platform, back to the Autodesk Construction Cloud. Here's a hint. Already built in that cloud environment, so that all works today. The Autodesk Construction Cloud has been built, it's almost like forged by fire. It's already been built in the cloud environment, just like Fusion, and spit it back out and get G-code into your factory so you can actually make those balconies. That exists today, not necessarily every one of the connective digital glue tissue things that exist, which hopefully some of you will be making, but you can actually have informed design today. Does that surprise people? By the way, manufacturing informed design is not a product name. It's a lot of different products. There's probably like 10 manufacturing informed design software companies I could mention today that are doing something similar. And so think of like your BIM model is going to be informed by things like Hypar or Cope or ICE or any of these guys I know. There's even like AI doing BIM routing of like services right now in manufacturing informed design. It exists. You got to get on Google. Ask the girls that are under 30 to look for some stuff for you, right? Because you'll find it. All right, so we're doing that today. And by the way, if you're productized and you have things like the balcony, you can do beta. You can actually do beta today and do some of this. We have some groups down here in Australia and New Zealand participating in that already, in that vision. And then only then can we really start talking about industrialized construction, which was, of course, what I love and where I came from after conventional construction. And if you read that, I want you to understand there's a difference between the convergence of manufacturing and construction and that definition. You see the subtle differences, right? It's not just about like, by the way, prefabrication happens after you draw the dumb box and then we figure out how to fit something in there that we can make. Products inform your design. And so that's different. And so, and how we get informed through the cloud, with stakeholders, with information, not just about assemblies, but think layers, assemblies with its carbon impact or energy analysis impact needs to live in my little backpack, right? So think about, I always say the physical thing is great because it just allows me to attach something to it. It's like an artificial reef in the ocean. Ecosystems start building themselves around it, right? So throw a tire down and now, not that you should, but throw a tire down and now you under an ecological tire that they approved. And make sure then you can build ecosystems around it, right? The second you call something a skid, you can start attaching data to that skid and understand how it performs and what pieces and parts are in it, and right? Like, but if you just call it like process, it's like in rugby. If there was the #1 most capped woman in the world, I think she's in England right now, but there was an asterisk next to her name because there was like a 10-year hiatus from women's rugby or something, you'd be like, well, it doesn't really mean much, right? Anytime there's an asterisk, because in sports, that means like the indicator of performance is basically nothing anymore, right? It's like, oh, well, it was a record, but not really a record because something was different. We have to stop building with asterisks here. We have to do 80% of what we reuse all the time, and then yeah, there'll be some fringes on the asterisks. But what we're doing is the reverse right now. And so anytime somebody gives me resistance, they give me the one stair thing they want to do that's unlike anything else. And I'm like, great, do that all day long. The 80% of everything you hate to do, let's automate that, right? And that's really what industrialized construction can do for you. And for many of you, I won't go too much into this. I always talk about this. You can look at any show I do. I talk about the house that industrialized construction built and how it talks about design make. But again, AI, ML, IoT, we all want big data and analytics. Just because you want it doesn't mean you can have it. But I want data that is actually reading things, that gives me information that I can share so that I can truly actually have predictive manufacturing tools. Wouldn't it be great if you knew how many balconies you were going to build in the next 3 years? Where's my balcony guy again? Raise your hand. Wouldn't that be great if you actually understood who designed your balconies without having to ask them with your mouth and your feet? By the way, Amazon has something called cart analytics. Do you know what that is? I know, as a seller on Amazon, everything anyone has put in their cart that is my product. I can market to them and say, hey, by the way, we have a gap in our production system right now. I can give you a 10% discount. What? That would be insane. Could you imagine in your factory? I was on the radio the other day, and the guy goes, well, in order for me to get to, and I hope I'm not picking on you if you're here, but he was like, in order for me to do this around housing for Kayangora, I got to have 3 years of guaranteed sales. I'm like, what? Like, I don't know anywhere in this world right now, anywhere, in any business, anyone's going to get 3 years guaranteed anything. We have to stop thinking like that. If I can only have, no, you can't. Because right now I can do things like on cart analytics and understand how to market very quickly. And when I go to Amazon, I see manufacturers, distributors, and resellers, right? All of them together. All the time. And the data on there is whatever they wanted to give me, although it meets the general data schema of Amazon so that it allows you to post and search and participate. They didn't tell me what I should make in my balcony. They just told me how I needed to give them the information in order for it to be achieved. Who's in government? Raise your hand. What's your name? Sean? Yes. Don't tell people how to make stuff. Just... I think they agree. But you should tell them the information required so that you can actually be chosen in the things that you make. That's what Amazon did, right? Just follow what everybody else did. You want to know why we're doing something and what you're trying to accomplish. Don't tell them how, right? I'm a capitalist. For those of you who don't, I'm not a feminist. I'm not political. I am a capitalist. Let the invisible hand of the market figure out how things and how people want to buy stuff. Stop dictating that part. Most governments, including the UK and everybody else, has realized that is not working. So, and then you want to think about things like DFMA, which I don't believe it should be called design for manufacturing and assembly. Stop saying that word. Why? We borrowed those concatenated phrases of ease of manufacturing and ease of assembly from manufacturing. The guys that actually make stuff use those phrases, and we were like, design, and Matt's like, that's my job. And I was like, but you don't know how to make stuff. And he was like, shh, that's my job. It says design. And I was like, It's really about data. The data that you want to inform these BIM models with so that you can actually have a BIM model that my friend, what's your name? Paul, he's afraid now, that my friend Paul said, I can't build from. Can you please make Paul happy and give him some information so he can actually use your BIM model and we can actually create some models that we can use to build the right thing, right? Because it actually has that capability. We're just not, giving it that information. So, and then I always think about, this is the easy part. By the way, for those of you who think volumetric modules are better than component piece parts, that's not correct. Right? Under any circumstances, any one of those things up there can be correct, and all of them at any one time. And by the way, if you're just building under a roof, like a conventional construction company, and you're just putting in boxes, also not the best, right? So there is no hierarchy of that physicality up there. But right now, people are starting to productize things, the heavy lift, if you're not already a building product manufacturer that has products. And eventually, things will just become products. Like, that verb will go away. And so we want that data to include things for advanced building methodologies like 3D printing, like any one of those things in automation and additive manufacturing, right? Like, that data has to exist there too, because you don't know how things are made and you certainly don't know how things are 3D printed, right? No shade on you. You make beautiful stairs. So, you know what I mean? Like, we have to understand that. And so, yes, because here's what people are recognizing. The biggest proponents of material circularity, people in the industrialized construction world making prefabricated elements that are taken apart and put back together. Think about it. What you're doing in your business right now around material circularity is nothing compared to those people that have been in the business of prefab for 50 years. That I've put airports in the Middle East that have been taken apart, permanent structures that were hardened and put on the Antonov airplanes and shipped someplace else. You want material circularity? Put anything up against that job I did, and I'll bow down. But we've been doing that for years. That was a 20-something-year-old job. The problem is, if you don't have the data and you're more focused on the dumb boxes and how pretty they look, basically we do floor plans and all these other things. And then what happens? We take whatever space is there. Who's a services contractor here? Anyone? That's a miss. You got to get more service contractors here. What happens to them is, as you design these buildings, you go, oh, wow, that's only 20% of the cost of the building. The 60% of the cost is in the services. Hold on a minute. Let me go get that picture over there, scoop up some services, and pour it into any other space that might fit. That doesn't make any sense when you think about material circularity, right? Because I want to reuse that electrical room for something one day, and I want to take things out, and I want to future-proof them, and I want to change that MRI, and that photon therapy thing in that hospital. But I can't because we just poured it into like the web of little spaces that you left me in the pretty little open conference rooms that cost nothing when these things cost 60% of the building. That doesn't make sense, right? Where are my young people? Does that make sense? If you have a party, where's Caitlin and these guys? If you were having a party and you knew you really wanted to have like chicken and some things at this party because you really need to fill your friends up because like they're all poor and I'm a student, I had no money, I was on the rice plan. You're like, whatever we do, we have to have chicken. You buy that first. Then you get to the party decorations later, if you can afford them or not. What we did is we're like, these are the beautiful party decorations. And people are like, I'm starving. Stop doing this. It doesn't make any sense, right? So we want to reuse things. Check this out. This is real. And I don't show a lot of home building stuff because I have a penchant for like the high tech, but this actually is a home builder on this side of the world. I won't say in this area, but on this side of the world, where we actually started in our consulting business. Because by the way, we do consulting for business advisory and implementation, right? Not just like Revit training. We do all kinds of stuff. So this company actually has factories and they have component parts that we started looking at. What could you actually measure in the component part as you productized it? What was important to them? Was it circularity or waste or all these things? And then we said, okay, fine. They were looking at embodied carbon, so we could create some calculators that existed for them right now to say, as you put these things together, you can pull on all those levers down there. Matt wants that, so that he can pick the right component, so that, check this out, you could actually figure out as they were looking at trucks, how many trucks they wanted to put it on. Hopefully this plays, we'll see, yeah. How many trucks does it actually take to get it to the job site? And which truck should I pack first in what order, knowing what I have to take off and build first? So it's taking into account what I have to do productivity-wise and also what I want to do carbon-wise. And there's no human in the world that could actually do this in their head or on paper or even with Excel that went through all the iterations through the algorithms that could figure out, okay, this is the exact perfect way based on what you said to pack these trucks. And it picked the truck out of all the other truck choices. It picked the truck that is going to use 94.73% of the truck, and it's going to have that amount of materials in it that we need that makes sense for us, and we're going to have the least amount of truck trips. That sounds like future, right? That's already been done. Robot dogs living in your house already, right? I just want you to know that. Like, you got to get out. How many people think LinkedIn is just for recruiting? You could have learned this if you were on LinkedIn reading some stuff. So check that out. No human could actually do that, right? And we're doing energy analysis models right now because you want to know that predictively, right? That's why you need your service contractors in here, by the way. A lot of them are participating in that in other parts of the world. Because why? They know how to make HVAC systems, right? We don't. You need those guys to do this stuff in order to compare performance information so that you're picking the right things in real time, right? Exists today. Same thing with dashboards that have embodied carbon. If you didn't read about this a few weeks ago with Insights, and you're going to see a lot of stuff coming up, really amazing things around sustainability, including we just launched a sustainability consulting division at Autodesk this last year. So if you need help with some of this stuff and you want to combine the future of making with some sustainable initiatives, you can come to us. So by the way, where's my guy with the balconies? Factory owners and even big owners that do pharmaceuticals or car plants and all this stuff, they want the thing on the right. They want to know that, by the way, they don't make any money on the building that you guys build for them. What do they make money on? The stuff going through it. Whether it's capacity of data centers, if it's meds, if it's whatever, people going through, that's what they need to make money on. And they don't want a stack of papers that they can't even look through that goes in the trash. They want a digital model of everything. So that why? They can simulate how many cars they can put through in a time. They can understand like supply chain issues, right? They want something called integrated factory modeling, which exists today. Not just for factories, but also for job sites. You could start looking at digitizing these job sites just like if somebody does a factory. And you can simulate supply chain, which is really important here in New Zealand, right? It takes a long time to get stuff here. I've shipped pottery back from Morris and James and Matakana. It takes a long time, right? But I need to know if it's going to take real long, what should I start building first, in what order, knowing that these are coming. And I don't do it based on a phone call and a phone call. There's actual digital records of where these things are. You can have that today. And this is not a New Zealand statement. I say this everywhere around the world. There's no one ring to rule them all. Let me say that again. I work for Autodesk. I always say, probably to their chagrin sometimes, I don't sell software and I don't sell services. There is no one product. If I could sell it to you today, you would have bought it already. It would be very expensive, and we'd be living in this lifestyle, right? There is no one ring to rule them all. You have to really think about how many of you know that Autodesk is moving and has moved away from being just a product company to being a platform company. Have you all heard that? If you haven't, you should know. If you don't know what a platform is, I used to show my own iPhone, but it had a lot of like unread personal messages. So I started showing this picture instead. This is a platform. I am a 51-year-old rugby-obsessed American woman with a 14-year-old kid who plays high school rugby, who loves the farmer's market, and is very boring when I'm not traveling the world. This is my platform, my Apple phone. Can I ask how old you are? If you don't want to say, you don't have to. Does anyone care if they want to tell me how old they are? How old are you? Anyone? How old are you, Matt?
59.
Thank you. He's 59. I guarantee, based on the way he's dressed and I'm dressed, we have different interests. Fair? And we're both here. We have some common. By the way, you're dressed fabulously. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant we like, obviously, maybe you buy the same shoes. I don't know. But we use the same platform, different workflows inside that platform, right? Like if you're single, you might use some dating apps. If you're a mom, you might use some babysitting apps, like whatever. If you're building, like I guarantee you, I look at more rugby stuff and Instagram than most of my friends that are 51-year-old moms. Same platform, different workflows, like same magical experience. If you think about how many apps it took you to get from the restaurant, like from your house to a restaurant last night, it's like 14 apps maybe. You don't even know you're using apps. You just got there magically, but things have to evolve. And that's really how the Autodesk platform on the Autodesk Platform Services is being built right now and is already built. We have about almost 4,500, 5,000 apps already, and about 150 are built a month by our customers, half of which are built by our customers. Here's the really cool part for you, Matt. We pointed to our heads and we said domain knowledge, right? Domain expertise. What if you built an app for your domain expertise that you could use in your own practice and everybody else could buy too? Do you know how much Waze is worth on the Apple platform right now? Do you guys know what Waze is? It's a direction app. Apple Maps lives on this, Google Maps and Waze, all on the same platform. You get to pick which one you want to use. But this is an open platform, just like Autodesk, and you can build anything you want. I would like to build something that is worth what Waze is worth, or Spotify, or WhatsApp. That is now. If you missed the internet boom, me and you are the same age just about, I didn't make that much money in that spot. This is your time. If you're young and you want to figure out how you're going to make $1 billion, start thinking about how you're going to build some digital glue. And what I always say is try not to replace the phone system. That's unlikely. Not that you can't, but it's just a lot harder. But I guarantee you can build some sort of digital glue connective tissue that is much better than what you have. So it's a platform. I'm going to go kind of fast through this part because I want to leave you some time for questions, and I'm doing okay on time, I think. So you may have seen this in the past. We used to call the Autodesk Platform Services Forge. It is now called the Autodesk Platform Services. Surprise, surprise. And we have these cloud information models that are being built and already built, parts of them, Autodesk Flow and Forma and Fusion. And those industry clouds in the platform obviously are connected in some ways and will be further connected. What do I mean by that? Remember when we first started on the Apple phones and like you would get a website and you would see the phone number and you'd have to write it down and then you would call from your thing after you wrote it down? That's what the platform looked like in Apple on day one, right? What happens now when you go to a website and there's a phone number? You just touch it and it dials the phone. In fact, when it doesn't, I'm like, who built this stupid website? Because obviously they didn't know how to do it because I should be able to touch that and it should dial. We're a little bit in the days of the website that has the phone number that doesn't connect to the phone yet. Still, and I'm being honest with you because we need partners of our customers to explain to us that I want the phone number to dial. I don't know what a 57-year-old architect in totality wants to do. That would make me a superhuman. I don't know what every general contractor, every services contractor wants, or anybody in a VDC role wants. We have to work that out. It's like building one digital workflow, one digital book in a library, one book at a time. And that's why you really have to start sharing and opening and partnering in communities like this, because you can learn from one another so that we're not, listen, who's building a hospital in here? Anybody working on a hospital project? You are? What's your name? Tom? Every hospital is pretty much the same behind the walls. Like every head wall, medical head wall, 80% exactly the same. The modality, whether it's ICU or maternity, or that little bit changes, but I promise you, we pretend like as if we're like, what is a head wall? I'm like, we don't need to do that. That guy wants 80% already productized, so you can be like, this one happens to be for maternity, and I want this special low voltage stuff because we're gonna like scan them when they go. But like 80% of what you build, we already know what it is. Just so, but you make money on defining what that is and drawing things that we redraw and redraw and redraw. So you might have to get rid of some of that waste. and start putting your money where there's actually more opportunity for you. Because trust me, when you own 50 hospitals, you know what a head wall is and you know what it costs. And you don't need you to define what a head wall is when they know they can buy it from some guy up the street without you having to define it. And by the way, I've been finding out even here, what happens now on in hospitals. Those areas are blacked out, right? You don't even touch it as a general contractor. They have equipment providers now that used to be contractors, services contractors, that now make that product. And you don't get to design it, and you don't get to really, you just need to understand how to integrate, but you don't get to actually price it anymore. You don't get to go to bid anymore for it. It's like you're gonna be looking at drawings that look like, you know that book, Who Moved My Cheese? Right now you're looking at drawings, you're like, oh, the penthouse is actually blacked out anymore. I don't actually get to design that. Oh, and next time you're like, oh, the penthouse and the head walls are actually black. I don't actually do that either. And then you're like, it's like the Jerk, if you saw that movie. He's like, all I need is this thermos and this table and this thing right as well. Every one of those areas is gonna get blacked out until there's nothing left. Now what? What do you do now? My general contractors are like, oh crap, around the world. They're like, what if we actually don't make money bidding things out and finding them subs and doing, my dad used to say, just take great meeting minutes and, beat up some subs. And I'm like, those days are over. Like, I'm not that strong anymore. And quite frankly, they don't need me. I need them more than they need us anymore, So we have to think about that. So, and by the way, this already exists. So you saw about the Autodesk Construction Cloud, and this is like a smattering of partners. There's so many partners right now in the ecosystem that you could use to make these little digital connections and workflows between, manufacturing, design, and construction that already exist. You just have to figure out which ones you want to use. And by the way, if you see one that doesn't exist, you should make it, right? We already said that. So what are the first things you can do? And then we're going to ask some questions. I'm going to go through this kind of fast. Most of my customers say this. I kind of know that I want to be with 50 robot dogs in my job site, but I don't know how to get there. Said every customer ever, except for the robot dog part. So I believe it's our job, and this is the only pitch I'll probably make for Autodesk, because that's the group I work in, that we get to actually help you. And we think about an outcome framework for our customers, and if you're an executive, you are mostly up in the value driver situation where you're like, this is what I want to be when I grow up, and here's how I know when I get there. If you're a BIM manager, raise your hand. You're probably down at like the workflow product side, a little bit in the capabilities. And the problem is, the reason why this hasn't really worked is what's been really missing are these solutions in between connecting what the CEO wants and what the BIM manager knows how to do. So I don't want you to think of solution as being a product. I'm going to teach you actually some new words today. Solutions are actually complex. They're like a selection of products, lots of different companies, not just one, outcomes, capabilities, and behaviors that it's like layered. There's systems architecture that's necessary. There's different capabilities and workflows. There's an ecosystem. There's products that you need to use. That's what a solution is. So let me give you some examples. Also, I like cake. That's why I put that in there. Integrated factory modeling that you saw up there is a solution. In fact, you need some of our software products and some that are not ours. We don't own ProModel as an example. And it probably has about 25 different workflows in order for you to get to that fully digitized factory. And there are tools like the Autodesk Platform Services apps, some that we own, some we've built, and some that are not ours, like Clintu, which that's not ours at all. And then there are solutions that you see, that integrated factory modeling. But here's the cool part. The thing that connects them is there are solution sets. This is a new concept for most people around the world. So of course I'm a New Zealander, so I have to talk about it early on here first. You want to think about these solutions in sets of where you want to get to. So at Autodesk, the way we think of some solutions as like Lego building blocks, and each one of those has a maturity to it. Like you could be at level 1 maturity for IFM, unlike Toyota, who might be at level 3 right now. If you're my balcony guy, you might be at 1. Toyota's probably at 3 or 4, right? And I don't know what 5 is. I like to not define 5 because I don't know what the metaverse is going to do really at this point, so I kind of keep 5 open. You got all these solutions, but if you're in industrialized construction and you want to be a service provider that gets more into being like a solution integrator, you might need these 5 of those solutions that work together, and we map out some workflows. But if you're a building product manufacturer like my couple guys that are here, and you want to be more of a solution aggregator, you need different solutions that build upon one another because you already know how to do product development, but not necessarily up to the level of digital twins and process simulation and operations monitoring, right? Like you're a little bit more mature in some of these, so you need different solutions. Just like owners don't need the same solutions that you need as contractors, right? They're looking for much more around the sustainability information, and they're imparting that need to us. Or if you're a generative designer, you need different things that, yes, as the contractor me, has connected construction in there because we don't like what I call technically dead cats. Do you know what that dead cat is? Where's my Paul? Where's Paul? You know what a dead cat is? when a designer chucks a dead cat over onto my construction site, and I'm like, what do I do with that now, right? I'm like, what do I do with this dead cat? You've got to connect these things together, and you see there's connection and commonality. And so before I get to questions, I'll tell you some big announcements that I saved for this week, except for the Advancing Prefab show last week. But for free, we've created a master's level course in industrialized construction at Autodesk. That was very important to me that it was free. My mom was the dean of a college. Some Ivy Leagues asked us to make it private. I said no. We made it free. You can download these modules. There's lots of quizzes if you're in academia. If you're in business, there's a different version, and there's smaller chunks of information, also free on the Learning Hub. If you don't know what Building Connected is, it's a way in which you can refresh a profile if you make something. And there's things like for bidding and insurance and BC Pro, first of its kind in the world. If you want to know if one of these products, one of these building types or services is made by somebody in the ecosystem and ultimately around the world, for free, let me say that again, for free, you can go refresh your profile. Where's my balcony guy? You can put your profile in there and say you make something, right? My steel guys, same stuff. And again, this is the first go around. It's like you can now Google, in quotes, you can now Building Connected and find out who makes what. This doesn't exist anywhere around the world. Right now, people just call me and say, who makes that thing in Australia or in Saudi Arabia? And I go, oh, well, this is what. No, we have to take what's in our brains, because Caitlin would never call me, right? And neither would Grace. They'd be like, where do I go to search for something? And I'd be like, go to Building Connected. It's the most up-to-date, not Amy Marks. So not only that, but we can actually now come out and do what's called an ICMA. So now you know who makes it. Then you want to be like, I want to eliminate the next question somebody asked me, which is, are they good at it? Well, good, I want to eat off the floor of every factory I go to, so you don't want to know what I think good is. But now we can actually do this assessment where you can actually look across different areas, and we're working with our partner at Haley & Aldrich, and we can come here and do it for you to understand, like I have a big hospital project being built right now, and they are assessing their top 15 prefabrication subcontractors around industrialized construction and themselves, by the way. They're doing it for themselves and their supply chain partners. Why do we have to work together? And then I'll take questions. Well, 40% of like what we do in our job is transactional waste, which doesn't provide any value to any building whatsoever. $100 building, 40% of that is transactional waste. Of the money I have left, 40%, depending on the numbers, 35 to 40% ends up in the trash. Did you know that? In the landfills, 1/6 of which is drywall. Name one product you buy today that you have an affinity towards. If it went on the news and said, we put 40% of what those pit vipers are that you put on your face, or whatever it is that you happen to like in the garbage, and you would never buy that product ever again, right? Where are my young people? Would you ever buy something? I always say, this is not a joke. I stopped drinking out of plastic straws because the cute guy from Entourage was like, we're killing sea turtles. And I was like, I should stop drinking with plastic straws. And then the world stopped drinking with plastic straws. No, they don't know what Entourage is. But like some celebrity told me to stop doing it, and I was like, okay. And then just Aquaman shaved his head and said, stop drinking with plastic straws. And I was like, okay, Aquaman, I will stop drinking with plastic straws. But where's my Aquaman? Why is he not standing next to me going like, 40% of what you all do ends up in the garbage? Why is that acceptable? We have to change our expected experience. If you want to reach me, I'm pretty reachable. You know, in the middle of the night, I write people back. And you can find me on any of these places, including my new website at queenofprefab.com. I will take a few questions and answers before. I think I did pretty good on time, Pam. I did. I left 6 or 7 minutes for questions, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, Amy Marks. Yeah. Woo! We have microphones.
Does anybody know Jason Momoa? Like, I would be happy if he was like, stand here.
Of him. We know. Yeah, we all know him. 1 degree of separation in New Zealand.
Yeah.
We've got actual microphones, so if there's a question in the audience, you can either go to one of those microphone stands or you can raise your hand and someone will take a microphone to you. This question, what's your take on sharing intellectual property, particularly in regard to liability for incorrect information?
For liability reasons. Well, we all know the contracting methodology has to change because even the model is not a contract document in most countries, depending on where you are. I think, listen, IP, again, as a capitalist, like there's something called like a level of abstraction. Like I can see products and how they perform with each other without knowing the fastener level detail. That's possible. I think IP, if you look at any of what's happened in IP in the large companies, especially even in tech and in product, they've given up on patents and they put that money and effort into creating the next. By the time your patent comes through, you don't even use that thing anyway. So if you look globally, most people have moved away from that and they've put that into their people, that money, and into things that are going on. And this is the other part I'm going to say. I get to see a lot of people's intellectual property. It's not so different. Like, I'm just being honest. Like, The secret sauce is never in the fastener level detail. It's in the people and the way in which they have the customer experience. It's like, here's what I used to say. Your grandma can't make lasagna like my grandma because I could give you the recipe because my grandma like touches every tomato and smells it and like she's like that one not so much. Like trust me, I could give you someone's secret sauce and you cannot make it like they do. So like give up on that notion that IP is stopping us from doing anything. I'm not saying there isn't anything that out there that isn't great, but I would keep it more to like your software things that you want to build than I would like somebody's like corner detail of something else because yeah, that's how I feel about it.
If you want to ask a question, raise your hand. We will get you a microphone.
I promise I'm not scary. I will be soft.
Not scary at all. There's another question here. Hey, Amy, tell us one thing that you have seen globally that we should try in New Zealand.
Okay, let's think about this. I will tell you that if you think in the near term, by the way, we're a $14 trillion ecosystem yet to be connected by e-commerce. What other $14 trillion ecosystem can be targeted by Alibaba, Amazon, or Ariba at this point that exists on this planet? None, right? Like, so, I mean, just inevitably, you know you're going to be targeted as an ecosystem in that new future state. If tomorrow the store opened, quote unquote, are you ready for that? Have you taken the domain expertise and created some, pay-per-use apps and like places in which we could act upon this to customize things and use that? Like, what I'm seeing you could take to New Zealand is many of these companies that recognize that that is going to happen is building their own component library, kits of parts and configurators and understanding their common data environment and how they're informing design in their own choices so that it's a much easier transition to externalize that when the floodgates open. So you can do that today. I don't think you can do any. By the way, you can go through most of those solutions today that I talked about. Again, some of them we have to hold hands together because they're a little bit more customized and some of them are in incubation rather than at scale, but you can do all of those.
Okay, I have another question here, and it is, do you think New Zealand should adopt the US data standards?
I don't think, look, I'm not, again, I'm a capitalist. I think data standards should actually just become like universal data standards. If you look at what's going on with movie making, like Weta is one of our customers. They actually have something called universal scene description. I hope I'm saying that correctly, where it's like application independent data standards so that anyone around the world can actually create movies and use the software in the same way. We should have that. Like, I actually don't see US versus any place else. I want universal data schema. Like, think about it. Like, if you want to sell something on Amazon, there are universal data schema requirements you have to meet if you want to sell on there. I believe everything should look like that, not like this country versus that country. I think it gets a little harder for us because building codes are different, but if the building code is part of the data understanding of when you customize that skid for this electrical usage versus that, as long as I can toggle between what geography, that data that needs to access it, right? Like, I think we're okay. But so I'm not a big believer in country versus country.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Let's not do it.
And I'm basically Kiwi at this point anyway, so let's just start with that.
And some of your measurements suck.
What's it again?
Some of your measurements, like the
yeah,
gallons.
I mean, like, first of all, I can barely do fractions at this point.
Yeah.
I do money, not math. I tell my daughter every day when she comes back with her math homework. So I would like everything to be easier. Everything, by the way, forget about like cheaper, just easier. When you have to ask yourself this, like everything that's easier ends up being used and you get more value out of it and you'll use it more. Just think easier every single time. Is it easier? Ask these young people, is it easier for you to do this versus that? That's the answer.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Amy Marks. Woo!